Hello, everybody, and welcome to the August 27th, 2018 edition of the Ephrom Josine Show. I am your host, Ephrom Josine. So, I figured we're obviously going to have to start today with the biggest news, the news that's been on every news channel, which, if you do not know, officially former U.S. Senator John McCain died of brain cancer on the 25th, about 2 days ago now. He stopped treatment for brain cancer the day before, and the next day he was just dead. Now, there is a lot you can say about John McCain. To be fair, some of it is good. He was, for instance, against torture and for things like campaign finance reform. He even created the McCain-Feingold Act. That's why he's named half of it. However, in order to really break down the results of John McCain's death, I figure we need to talk about specifically how the U.S. is viewed in the rest of the world. Because study after study comes out saying that the United States is currently considered to be the biggest threat to world peace. Kyle Kalinske covered that tons of times. Cenk Uger's covered that tons of times. Yeah, Addicting Info's covered that tons of times. You can find a whole bunch of news sources saying that. That it's not Iran, it's not North Korea, it's the United States. And John McCain was a war hawk. That is just an objective fact of reality. You know, he was one of the biggest neoconservatives during the Bush administration. He supported the invasion of Iraq, he supported the invasion of Afghanistan, supported arming tons of places. I'm going to actually quickly see how many invasions he supported. Just by pulling up his Wikipedia page real quick. Let's see. He wanted to go to war with Iran. You know, you guys remember during his 08 campaign, he literally sung about bombing Iran. He supported going to war with Libya. He supported intervention in North Korea. In Pakistan, he talked about arming places in, Crimea. He talked about arming Crimea when Russia tried to annex them. You know, and so on and so on. The only place off the top of my head that I can think of that he didn't support attacking that was considered a U.S. ally or a U.S. enemy is Cuba. He actually wanted to normalize relations with them. In fact, he even said on live television during the debates about the Iran deal that we should base it off of how Ronald Reagan based his invasion of Grenada. The problem with that is Reagan's invasion of Grenada was, I think, the first time the United States was actually condemned in an international court, because it was determined that completely violated international law, because he, according to John McCain himself, just told everyone the next morning. Now, I want you to imagine for a second that you are put in the place of anyone else in the world, and you hear that someone who has supported invasions of several sovereign nations of a country that's considered to be the biggest threat to world peace, died, and everyone from that country was really sad about it. You know, they were playing it on news back to back. They're probably going to show his funeral on every 24-hour news station. However, how do you think those people would feel? The answer is probably they wouldn't particularly like us at that point. And that is why, for that matter, I actually do support Donald Trump's policy when it comes to taking a sort of not really mentioning John McCain. This is one of the few things that Donald Trump is doing that could actually improve relations in other countries, is simply acknowledge not really acting like it's a big deal when someone who supports invading other countries dies. I think that would make the other countries that he supported invading like us a little bit more. But of course, that can't be why. It has to be all because Donald Trump was disrespecting John McCain. And for that matter, even if that is the case, so what? He's actually doing the right thing for once. He's actually doing something in the long term that could actually help us. But no, we can't do that because we gotta be enemies with everyone so we can be allies with all of them after we've invaded them. That's basically been the U.S. way for several decades. Again, of course, whether or not, you know, this was all Donald Trump's goal, or whether or not Donald was just bitter at John McCain because he didn't let him repeal Obamacare or something. I really don't care at that point. This is Donald Trump doing the good thing for once, which he almost never does. I think that's like the third time he's done that in his entire presidency. And yet, the entire centrist Democratic Party, the centrists in the Democratic Party, which is basically the entirety of politicians, are going, "This is unbecoming of you, sir. How dare you? I clutch my pearls hard." For improving foreign relations. Weren't these the same people who said Donald Trump would lead to a third world war? Which he still could, for the record. He still could. I'm not saying he can't. I'm just saying, shouldn't we steer him away from that as far as possible? I mean, imagine for a second. Let's say, I forget his name. The Secretary of Defense that was typically cited as the one who's most responsible for invading Vietnam. He was Secretary of Defense under Johnson for a while. I forget his name, though. Say he died during a Democratic presidency. He is dead, for the record, I believe. Yeah, it would make sense to just sort of shove that under the rug from a politics standpoint. Now, maybe that's not the right thing to do morally, and we can have that debate. I'm willing to have the debate with you. However, this is still beneficial to the United States in the long run, and I am willing to take that. Mind you, it does not seem that Donald Trump wants us to do that and I'm pretty sure that was just a pure accident, because now he is talking about getting us out of NAFTA, the North Atlantic Free Trade Agreement. Oh, sorry, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which, if you do not know, was passed in the 90s, 94 to be exact, under President Clinton, although it was originally written by George H.W. Bush. And it's essentially a free trade document. It determines how free trade goes along. And now, there were a lot of controversial provisions of NAFTA. I'm not going to deny that. And there were a lot of things that, in the short term, did look very bad. Most notably, the fact that corporations started moving jobs overseas. However, it has been proven over time that NAFTA had a positive effect on the economy, most notably when it came to the fact that it lowered prices for the average consumer and therefore made more goods affordable. And that also helped create more jobs, so the economy evened out pretty well. Donald Trump wants to get us out of NAFTA. Now, here is the main problem with that. That is the defining document when it comes to free trade and U.S. relations. Pulling us out of NAFTA is about as disastrous as pulling us out of the UN, which Donnie has also talked about doing. Essentially, our president is an isolationist. And I don't even mean the sense of how some people falsely accuse people like Noam Chomsky or Kyle Kalinske as being isolationist. I mean directly. He just seems to want us to live in, well, that's why he wants us to have a wall. He wants to create a giant dome over us. And that's what really bothers me here. And not only that, but that'd be absolutely detrimental to foreign relations, because if you pull out of NAFTA, first off, no country's ever going to trust you, and we have a decent amount of natural resources that could really help other countries. So essentially, we're saying screw you to other countries. However, that also means, and this is the big one, that we can just pull out of deals anytime we like, even if they are, in the case of NAFTA, over 20 years old. Almost 25 years old, in fact. So, what's stopping us from unsigning all the peace treaties we've signed? Now, we've barely signed any as it is. We haven't signed the most out of any nation. In fact, I think we've actively signed the least out of any nation. However, what was I gonna... However, that still means we have still signed some, and now the international community trusts us less than ever, partly because of the getting rid of the Iran deal, and now because we're pulling out of one of the oldest agreements. There are people on this earth who voted in the last election that have been alive for less time than NAFTA has been into law. That's it. I'm Ephrom, and good night.